Hello, and welcome back to the Daily Stack. This is the Friday edition, our favorite one, the Friday Stack. We're giving away 21,000 sats of free Bitcoin. We're talking to the Bitcoin Twitter's resident fourth turning expert, Brandon Quittem, and we're breaking down all the biggest news in Bitcoin, in the world, the economy. Job apocalypse. Jack Dorsey just lit Silicon Valley on fire, firing 40% of his workforce over at Block. Is this a sign of things to come? So much to discuss. We got a big one today. Brandon, how are you doing, man?
The world's crazy. I'm doing all right. I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
Absolutely. And Avi, what's up?
I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while. Brandon's a fellow Minnesotan. I don't know how I stumbled on the Minneapolis Bitcoin group, but that was fun. I went one time when I was there this summer. I'm a true Minnesotan, so it's always fun to connect with other Bitcoiners from Minnesota. So I'm ready to rock. Nothing better than talking, I call them conspiracy truths. So we'll dive into a lot of this today. But yeah, that Jack news is pretty crazy.
Jack news is pretty crazy, but before we get started on the news topics, we got to talk about what we're doing here today over with the Daily Stack. Go to 21rates.com/stack and put in today's code word. Today's code word is turning because we're going to play Mount Rushmore, our favorite Friday game. And if you enter the word turning and sign up, you get the chance to participate in our giveaway of 21,000 sats every Friday. We are doing this. Today's code word is turning. Go sign up at 21rates.com. Become part of the community. There's other things you can do to earn more sats and keep on stacking. We're here to help you grow your Bitcoin stack. That's what we do. So much fun to be here on the Daily Stack. But let's get right into it because we got a news topic today. Jack lit the world on fire last night with this message right here. We're making blocks smaller today. Here's my note to the company. They are cutting the workforce from over 10,000 down to just under 6,000. And they're giving people a nice package. You'll receive salary for 20 weeks plus 1 week per year of tenure, equity vested through the end of May, 6 months of healthcare, your corporate devices, and $5,000 to put toward whatever you need to help pay. So that's a nice way to let people go. But the reason why? AI. He says that they're making this decision because something has to change. They're seeing that intelligence tools are creating and using paired with smaller and flatter teams are enabling a new way of working, which fundamentally changes what it means to build and run a company. And that's accelerating rapidly. So let's take a pause right there and let's get Brandon's opinion on this. Do you think that this is just the beginning, or is Block in a certain situation where they needed to get rid of some people here?
Yeah, so I think the meta here is that these tools are advancing at a rapid pace. And I think in the last, let's say, 6 months with more of the agentic workflow stuff, companies that are on the frontier of technology are finding incredible value here. And they're finding that, let's say, engineer types with high agency can apply these tools, and all of a sudden a mid-level engineer is now a 10x engineer because they have high agency and they can apply tools. And so when you start to see that stuff, there's also a bifurcation in the workforce where certain people are well suited or taking the stuff serious a little farther ahead. They have an advantage in the markets right now. And so I don't think Block is unique here. You might say Dorsey's on the earlier side of what's coming. I think he's historically been that way. But everything I hear out of Silicon Valley or anyone on the frontier of tech, they're doing the same thing now. They've done it already or they're exploring it. So I expect quite a bit more of this. And like with any new technology, we'll overshoot many times up and down through the coming new wave here. And so we'll probably cut too deep across tech. We'll probably find a balance over the coming years. That's my guess. But I think it is inevitable. I think what's interesting I saw from Luke Grillman today on Twitter was he had a tweet where essentially, will AI take all the white collar jobs? He believes not, and I agree. You just need fewer people with more leverage. But his question is, how many white collar jobs have to be lost before we have a consumer credit crisis And then we end up with a government receipt crisis, meaning less tax receipts, which triggers a potential sovereign debt crisis. And
Mhm.
how fast will that happen? I have no idea how true that is, but I generally trust Luke's big picture thinking. I think he's been right about a lot of this stuff. So I thought that was an interesting one to raise.
Well, yeah, if people are losing their jobs, then they don't have the money to pay for things. That whole trickle down is pretty crazy. I mean, with Square Block, now I still call them Square, but they did also hire crazy. I think they 3x'd their entire company during COVID. A lot of the backlash too. I think they just threw like a huge party like a quarter ago as well that spent like millions and millions of dollars. So people that are working there, but I'm on the same page as you. I mean, we're using AI constantly, and we don't need to necessarily go out and hire 20 people right now. It's like we can do what we're doing with a much smaller team, and that's the big macro that I see happening. Like new companies that come into fruition, like everyone's going to be this new Instagram where they get acquired with 8 employees or whatever they were at, you know. So it is crazy, but that trickle down effect that you're talking about, it is scary. If all of a sudden people don't have jobs, you know, people have been, you know, the mortgage, we didn't even talk about it as well. A lot of people that bought these houses thinking that they're good in their career, they may need to look over their shoulder. I know I had a friend over at Salesforce that was telling me that they're worried about their job. We're seeing it kind of across the board. Microsoft had a huge layoff. Meta had huge layoffs. Not 40% like Block did, but it's coming, and people need to wake up, I think, because you know, in my circle, a lot of my friends are using this stuff, but so many people are still not. And like you said, if they have to fire someone at the company, they're going to keep the person that's 10xing the output of the next person next to them. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and one comment you mentioned with Block, kind of overhiring, and is this partially a response to overhiring? I think that's absolutely true, right? In any org, you should be culling the low performing employees over time. That's healthy. It's often the right thing to do for that employee, right? It doesn't mean they're a bad employee. Maybe it was a bad fit, a bad role. And so it's healthy for the org, healthy for the individual to move on. And so now you have a catalyst that makes culling employees very easy, and the market will reward that, as we saw with Block. I haven't checked the stock today, but after hours, Wall Street was rewarding that move. I expect other companies will do the same. And if you can show the same profitability with fewer employees, yeah, that's going to have a ripple effect. And every CEO, I'm sure, is thinking about that now.
There's so many layers to this. So before 2020 and COVID, Block was around 3,000 employees, and then they rocketed up to 12,000, right? There was this huge like hiring spree that went on, I think, during COVID and the funny money, and all this tech companies were growing like crazy. One of the reasons was because Square and Cash App were essentially 2 separate companies within Block, right? And since then, they've tried to rectify that and unify them. And I think that's been a huge problem for the company in the past, is that these 2 different aspects were fighting against each other for resources and had different incentives. And now they're all unified. And you're seeing that the company is really unifying behind Bitcoin in so many different ways, right? I mean, you've got the Square terminal accepting Bitcoin. Cash App has just removed all fees for buying Bitcoin. They're making it easier to withdraw your Bitcoin from there. So between Square, Cash App, and of course you've got BitKey and you've got proto mining. So many different layers of Block are all about Bitcoin. And now it's really all focused towards one unified, incentive-driven company to make this possible. They went crazy with the hiring. Now the company is streamlining. And it's funny that like there's so many things about Jack, right? I mean, he's an amazing Bitcoiner. He's given away so much money and Bitcoin towards the Bitcoin development community, and he's created all these great products, right? Like Bitcoin Twitter. Like we talk on the app that he created, and then he's got a hardware device. I've got one right here, right? A BitKey. This is his hardware, and then they're mining too. So many cool things happening with Block and Bitcoin, and he's a great product guy. But now they're really trying to see if they can make this company work on a different level here. So very interesting. Many people were ragging on him, saying that he just overhired and that they're as you said, overspending on parties and whatnot. But this is a sign of things to come. and is being rewarded in the stock market is just going to show to other CEOs that yes, if you cut a lot of people and streamline, your stock will go up.
He was kind of notorious though. Like Twitter, when Elon came in, right? He cut 80% right away. So I don't know if it, part of this could be Jack just, having this tendency to overhire, but again, it's across the board. I just watched Tim Ferriss and Bill Gurley last night on YouTube, and they were talking about this. And Bill Gurley, Benchmark Capital, like famous VC guy, he was saying that like all of his VC buddies, if they don't have AI in their business model, like they're not touching it right now. Every VC is pouring money into this AI, which is, pretty obvious to anyone that's been on the news, but it is, this is not going to slow down. It's only going to, the money pouring into that's not going to slow down, and the technology itself is not going to slow down. You played around with ChatGPT, a year or two ago, and now you go into Claude and you go into even ChatGPT. Now it's light years, better than what it was. And so it's just continuing to extrapolate and go faster and faster. And so it's a topic that's not going to be going away. We'll be talking about it a lot.
Not at all. And our next topic will directly relate to this. But first, I want to give a shout out to our own X page here. Speaking of Twitter, speaking of X, we got to give a shout out to the Daily Stack page. It's brand new. It's growing. We just crossed 1,000 follower barrier. That's awesome. Thank you so much for following us there. All the latest updates. We got articles on AI. The live streams are right there. See who's coming up that day. Follow the Daily Stack on X and also our YouTube. We're just a sprouting little YouTube page with 61 subscribers, but all the live streams are edited, cut up into nice hour-long segments for you to view the following day. Really awesome stuff going on our X, on our YouTube. Please follow us there. It means a lot. We're building a community one day at a time. And now our next topic. Because the AI apocalypse is here, we got a jobs bill coming out of a senator from Hawaii. He wants to introduce 2 AI labor bills in the coming months. So why it matters. Lawmakers are under increasing pressure to respond to fears that AI will upend the job market, and they're starting to throw out ideas of how to deal with it. Working on one bill that will impose a progressive, non-deductible excise tax on AI company revenues. The tax would fund a worker retraining program, including a living stipend and health benefits. It would subsidize state and local governments to employ displaced workers and also require the federal government to retrain workers for jobs within agencies. And then the second bill would trigger an automatic whole of government response if unemployment exceeds 5.5% for 2 quarters. It would require grant and loan programs, regulators, and policymakers to prioritize employment impacts in their decisions. So, Brendan, this is just breaking news, just came out in the middle of last night. But does this make sense to you? Do you think we're going to see more of this coming out of the U.S. government?
Yeah, so thank you for the overview. This is new to me, but thankfully ChatGPT catches me up very quickly.
Yeah.
I think to answer your question directly, yes, we're going to see a lot more of this. But in order to understand that, let's set the table a little bit with some context. I'm going to jump the gun slightly. We're going to talk about the fourth turning soon, but this has to be shared. We're at a period of extremely high economic inequality, right? Money printer makes it worse. Decaying institutions makes it worse. Add some new technology, that makes it worse as well. So we have a situation where economic inequality looks like it's going to get worse, and the people feel it. This is the same reason why we see socialism rising. Okay, young people feel that the American dream is no longer available to them. And as soon as you break a social contract as deep and fundamental as that, the people will vote. So we're going to see increased issues there, increased socialism, increased pain. And I don't like redistribution. I like capitalism. I like markets as a default. But in a situation when it gets this bad, we have to do something about the economic inequality. Is it siphon profits from AI companies and drop them down to the masses? Is it slow down the technology? They're going to try everything imaginable. And I don't like any of the solutions I've seen so far, but the honest truth is we do have to fix economic inequality. And the elites, who appear to be absolute psychopaths, it's actually in their best interest to make sure it doesn't get out of bounds here. Because if it gets too bad, the people burn the cities down and then there's nothing left. And so it has to be fixed. And yeah, they can pacify us as for a while with TikTok, weed, porn, video games, right? That pacifies the masses for a time, but at a certain point, you can't pay your bills, you can't buy food, and then things get worse. And so the instinct's there. It makes sense to try to do something. Don't know how it's going to shake out, but we're going to see a lot of this. Another one is wealth tax in California. Same deal. Wealth tax in Europe. And we have a parallel here historically. Every time we're in a fourth turning, we reach this economic inequality issue, and that does lead people to look for alternatives. In the 30s, the educated, what we call the coastal elites, they were all exploring alternatives to capitalism too, and they weren't shy about it. And it's the same thing the young people are experiencing now. Socialism obviously doesn't work, but the instinct to seek that is real, and we shouldn't dismiss it as dumb people who don't know history, even if that's partially true. The pain is there, and we do have to address that energy. Otherwise, the social climate will continue to get worse, and then we flirt with potential conflicts, Americans on Americans, something like a second civil war here. That's the direction we're headed. I live in Minneapolis, so I feel the on the ground stuff here and how it changes the city, how it changes the people. It causes massive, massive damage.
You said one thing, Rob, that kind of scared me. You said that they'll replace these workers with government jobs. And that's we're leaning right into that socialism and communism, where it's, half the nation starts working for the government. And Trump's done a good job of chopping some of that, but it's you see it. I'm in New York, right? And so both of us are, and we're seeing with Mamdani paying people $30 an hour to shovel snow, and like all the videos of people sitting on the snow banks and not even working. And it's just like, all right, that's a microcosm of what happens here when you just give people free money, basically. They don't check in. It was funny though. They needed 2 forms of ID to shovel, but not to vote. So it's a lot of chaos, a lot of craziness going on. And that piece scared me though, that they're going to start putting them into government jobs.
And it should, right? I listened to a Naval podcast over the weekend, and I'm going to get maybe the math a little bit wrong, but he said roughly 2/3 of the jobs now are directly or indirectly from the government. And so I think this is a natural consequence of having something like a democracy. Vote me in and I'll give you more money. That's always going to win. And if you just incrementally vote larger government every time, multiplied by 70 years, all of a sudden the government employs almost everyone. And that's not how you make a market. That's a very expensive government to run. And all of a sudden, if you get rid of those jobs, then we end up with the same consumer credit crisis. So you kind of trap yourself into that situation, and it reinforces bigger government every time, because more and more people are employed by the government. So,
well, and the big thing to think about too is like, and this is what they were talking about in this article I read, but like these AI bots, at least today, and I think that will change somewhat, but it's still like mind blowing to me. They're not spending money like we are, right? And they're not like going out and buying an iPhone. They're not going to be going out and going to dinners and things like that. And so this is something I don't know if we've ever seen before, where AI, and then Tesla's got the robots. You put AI in those robots. I'm an optimistic guy, but it's harder and harder. You kind of see the writing on the wall of where this is going to go, and it is scary. So I don't know if I have the answer for it, but I don't know if more government jobs is the answer.
Never the answer. One counter example here that's hard to see when you're in it is all new technological revolutions displace jobs for sure. But they also create new markets, new jobs, new sectors that didn't exist and that are really hard to forecast, right? So I think we have to assume some amount of new categories of work will appear. I don't know what those are, but we have to assume some. And then the other end of the spectrum, like the sci-fi forecast, is like there is no work and labor is essentially worth nothing. But that also means cost of living goes down a lot. And so we all end up with unlimited free time. And it's not about finding meaning through labor. It's about finding meaning through like arts and community and like deeply human, unique things.
Mhm.
Right? That's kind of what Elon pitches. It's like the robots do everything, and you just make music and art and hang out with your friends. I think the reality is somewhere in the middle, but I think those are the bounds to play with.
Yeah.
So one guy I really want to shout out on YouTube, his name is David Shapiro. He's an AI expert, and he's been focusing on post-labor economics. How is the world going to look after labor gets flattened and the cost of knowledge gets put to zero? And one thing Americans don't like is the idea of handouts, right? Or at least the majority of Americans don't. And so UBI is a really hard sell in America, but Americans love dividends. And so if you say that this is your America dividend, like they have in Alaska, where everybody gets a cut of the oil profits, or is everybody going to get a cut of the OpenAI profits? That's the real question moving forward. And then once we are post-labor, I think we're still monkeys, right? And we love status, and a lot of people derive their status from their work now, of course. And so without that as a way to differentiate, I think people are going to just find different status games, whether it be social media following or how jacked you can get. Looks maxing. I think looks maxing is a direct effect of the AI job apocalypse.
I like it. No, I like it a lot. No, I think I mean, that's been a fun phenomenon to watch too, is all these like YouTubers talking about looks maxing and all that. So it is. I mean, if you have extra time on your hands, like now that I don't work a W-2 job, I can go to the gym during the day, so that part does seem exciting, but you look who's saying it, and they all have ulterior motives to sell more AI. So somewhat skeptical still.
But I think your point, Rob, on status games don't go away. I think that is a really important point. That's innate in humanity, right? In hunter-gatherer tribes, dude who found the coolest feather on his hat is the man.
Mhm.
The chick who found the coolest shell and made a necklace, like she's the boss, right? And yeah, now it's in America, our culture is on your employment, right? You go to Europe, hey, how are you? What do you like to do? Where do you go on holiday? In America, what do you do for work? We instantly stack rank each other by this perceived status based on employment. And if we go into a post-labor environment, what will replace that? I think looks maxing might be like a tip of the spear type of thing, but I also think there's an element there where we don't really trust our institutions. Let's take the medical institution, for example. Pretty much everything we know about healthcare is demented through a lens that I don't think necessarily has their best interest in mind. And we don't really make people well. Like healthcare is really sick care. We apply blunt force tools to the worst problems, but we have no idea how to deal with mental health. Like a lot of the looks maxing is like fix your fascia and your face looks better, fix your hormones, fix your lymphatic drainage and you look better. That's all real and true. And it feels like people are uncovering health and wellness trends through bro science, meaning like iterating, finding old knowledge, N of one experiments and sharing things that actually work. So to me, that's partially, looking deeper into health, and also this like high agency individuals in a connected information meta brain. We're all sharing information. So we're all like N of one little scientists in a meta brain uncovering things that make our lives better. And that's a pretty special thing. And I think that will continue. So a little flavor to your.
No, I like the they haven't done enough in my opinion, but I do like the Maha movement where they flipped the triangle on its head of what we thought we should be eating our whole lives. I took some creatine this morning based off your tweet. So I started tweeting 20 milligrams of creatine. I usually take 5, but I upped it up a little bit today. So
no wonder why you're so sharp today.
Yeah, I'm just on my game right now. No, it is.
Did you boof it or did you snort it?
I only. This is gonna get clipped probably. I did not boof it this time, but I usually enjoy the boof. And then just COVID I think woke a lot of people up. The fact that they were like giving away hamburgers, people were giving away ice cream or joints. Literally in New York City, they were giving away free weed. if you went and got your vaccine. And I was like, something seems a little odd here. And so I started diving in, and I think that was a big awakening for a lot of people, to start. Maybe the institutions are not telling us the right thing. Even in just a microcosm too. I have a friend who's a doctor, and I think they studied a total of like 10 hours of nutrition, and the majority of it is on big pharma. And so then you see who's putting money into these schools, and it's like, oh, surprise, big pharma is behind a lot of these schools, right? And so that is something that I think will be interesting to kind of see how this is going to take decades to play out, to see how the effects are. But if any nation needs to flip their healthcare system on their head, it's the United States of America. We have too many obese people, young children, and it's like not good for your health, and a strain on the economy too, ultimately.
I'm going to pause the conversation right there. I think that was a great summation of everything that we are going through right now, because we are about to go into our game and pick our resident expert's brain on the fourth turning, the signs that we are in one right now. But before we get in the game of Mount Rushmore, we got to give a big shout out to our sponsors over at Rhino. Previously, getting access to Bitcoin financial services has been slow, clunky, scattered across multiple platforms. But Rhino is changing that. Rhino is a next-generation Bitcoin banking app designed to handle all of your Bitcoin needs in one place. With Rhino, you can buy Bitcoin at some of the lowest fees anywhere. More sats for every dollar. Make payments over the Lightning Network. Send it instantly to anywhere in the world. Send cash globally. You got friends or family across the world who need some cash, send it over Bitcoin Rails. And of course, you can DCA, set up automatic savings so you stack sats on your schedule and build wealth over time. Soon, you'll be able to pay bills, direct deposit, borrow against your Bitcoin, and even save for retirement, all seamlessly inside the app. And of course, security is a top priority. Rhino protects your Bitcoin with biometric verification, 24/7 fraud protection, and the confidence of knowing your Bitcoin is never, ever rehypothecated. And for long-term users, of course, they've got a Casa multisig integrated. So if you have Casa as your multisig setup, you can use Rhino as one of your keys. Go today to rhinobitcoin.com and download the app. Of course, it's on Apple and Android. Use the code Bitcoin News, and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin straight into your account just to get started. Great team over at Rhino, our good friends. Check them out. Hit them up on Twitter. More than willing to answer all your questions. And they are a big sponsor of the coming Women of Bitcoin Summit next week, put on by Natalie Brunel and Efrat. So if you got any women in your family who want to get exposed to Bitcoin, send them over there. Should be a very good time. All right, boys. Are you ready for Mount Rushmore? This is going to be your first experience on the game, my friend. Are you ready? Do you know the rules? I think we explained it to you. Look at this setup. It's beautiful. Love what we got going on here. So we're going to do a snake draft, and the game is signs we are in a fourth turning. So, Brandon, hit it off. What's your number one sign right now that you see that we are in a fourth turning?
Yes. And before I do, I want to go back to the previous point for some inside baseball. You said COVID waking people up. Inside baseball at Swan is that we started off on a platform primarily millennials, like classic Bitcoiner ethos, buying Bitcoin. During COVID, we saw a huge increase in older Gen X and boomer clients who realized, wait a minute, government's printing all this money, what's going on? And so we saw a huge influx of those folks buying their first Bitcoin. And so I think that is very real. That was a wake-up call to many, and just one data point in the Bitcoin side. Okay, to Mount Rushmore, one thing that I see as a sign of the fourth turning is cancel culture. And cancel culture is an instinct, in my opinion, that emerges during a fourth turning. We look around and we say, wait a minute, society is going off the rails. We have to make massive sacrifice and massive change in order to get through this hard time. And that shows up in a sense of like, if you're not with us, you're against us. And it creates increased political division. And both sides in an internet age have their own facts, their own information bubbles. They both believe everything they hear is true. And then we see caricatures of the opposing political side online, which again digs our heels in. This divides people massively. Like friend groups are divided socially based on politics in a way that we've never experienced in our life. And this also can be shown up in data in some ways. Recent polls show that roughly 20% of Americans believe that violence may be necessary to save the country. So in order to get your political views across, violence may be necessary. That's entirely insane. That's not what America is. That is like Banana Republic stuff. And so that's quite scary. And that same kind of cancel culture is related to social divisions. You can kind of call this one thing. But I'll ask you guys a question to illustrate this. I think this was in 2025 data. What percentage of marriages in 2025 were between a Democrat and a Republican? What do you guys
think? 10% is my guess.
I'm going to go 5.
Yeah.
5% max.
4%.
Yeah.
That's wild.
If you ask our parents that question, I don't know the number, but it's probably like over 50% or around that. Either way, sign of the times, cancel culture is my point.
Yeah. Just piggybacking on that idea too. It's like you actually have discussions with your friends, and I'd say, you know, I have friends that are Democrats and Republicans. You talk to them about topics, and I think there's 80% agreement, you know, but what we see in the media perpetuates this, and they perpetuate the 10% on both sides. Those are the loudest voices in the room. Those are the people that get elected because the primary is typically just the 10% on both sides that are caring about this early. And so you get in a situation where, you know, Trump's created a lot of division, but the media amplifies every single thing about him, you know? And so they create this hatred. They start pointing fingers at them, you know, and it's like these guys, and they're creating a lot of the violence. There was some tweets that like did a kind of a collaboration or a montage basically of all the people saying, one, like for during COVID, it's like if you're unvaccinated, the winter of death is upon you, and people were like pitching that constantly and putting that in people's ears. And then now it's, you know, if you're a Republican, it's like these guys are violent, these guys are all Hitler, you know, and like saying stuff like that, you know, not only minimizes what Hitler did, but it's like it puts this idea in people's head. And we've seen this political violence now. Like Trump got shot at. We saw what happened with Charlie Kirk, and like there was another judge too that I saw. I think it was on your timeline that they retweeted too. But like during the Epstein stuff, like the judge that was supposed to look into that, his wife got killed or something like that. So this political violence needs to stop, you know, on both sides. But the media is just perpetuating all of this and creating this divide. And I think that's intentional because it's a lot easier to conquer a populace if they are divided, you know, versus everyone on the same team. So yeah, that's a good one. Mine may be more obvious. It's just like the debt that we're in. National debt is at 38.4 trillion when I last checked. Debt to GDP is 122.6. So the last time it was this high was post World War II. Interest on that debt is the craziest thing. That's almost like $1 trillion a year that we're gonna spend, and projected to be 2.1 trillion by 2036. That equates to $284,000 per household that's in debt. So when, you know, this is the government, and we see this big number in New York. There used to be a huge sign that was like going through the roof. They actually moved that sign now, but it's, you know, very fake to a lot of people still. We don't like realize it. We're like, okay, we'll just print more money. You know, our lives are not changed that much, but it's talked about more and more now. And if we're not able to settle this debt, there's an explosion, right? You just have to print more to get yourself out of it. And that just perpetuates the issue even more. And I think, you know, where you see things like Bitcoin pop up is a result of that, and seeing the rationale of like, hey, we do need a finite, you know, you can't just keep printing money. You need something that is more finite, that you can actually say, okay, there's 21 million ever. This makes sense, right? And that's one of the biggest things I think is just like spending to the oblivion, and the places that we are, you know, and finding fraud is another thing, kind of talking about this cancel culture. It's like we're pointing fingers at all these different states that are allowing all this fraud now. And so it's I'd say the national debt is one of the bigger issues at play here.
One comment on the debt that makes this problem worse is, yeah, we hit similar debt levels post World War II, after we had a war. We haven't had the war yet. We're already at debt up to our eyeballs, and I still believe the worst is yet to come. And so what does that look like, and how far will the debt go in that world? Pretty scary.
And a common fourth turning theme is that inflation is the answer. It's not the problem, right? When you create all this debt, the easiest way to pay it back is with cheaper dollars. So they're just going to destroy the value of the dollar so that these 39 trillion, 40, 50, 60 trillion dollars worth of debt can be easily repaid with pieces of paper that are worth drastically less. So that is a line from Neil Howe, that inflation is the answer, not the problem for the powers that be when it comes to fourth turning.
Yeah, and after World War II, we went through about a decade of what Lynn Alden calls financial repression, which is the inflation as the solution, right? I think you're right there. We either have extreme austerity, we have an economic productivity miracle, or we soft default, aka sacrifice the currency to devalue the debt. Yeah, that's definitely going to happen. The only wild card here is, could AI create a productivity boom that rivals the post World War II American economic boom? Right, we had a relative advantage because Europe's destroyed, and we had an advantage because we just invested in a bunch of machinery, which we could then retrofit post-war into other useful things. And so we don't have a war boom yet that will lead to economic productivity, but we might have an AI productivity boom. But if we do, it still does feel like we're going to have that will increase economic inequality as it looks today, versus a decentralized industrial boom, which we had post-war.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings me to my topic, war in Iran. We have the largest armada and just military force in the Middle East since 2003, camping outside of Iran, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Of course, Iran is big allies with both Russia and China. And if we attack Iran, it seems as if that has the opportunity of creating a larger global conflict. Of course, the last 3 fourth turnings, we had the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and World War II. That is how all of those climaxed. It would only make sense that America, as the global power since World War II, since the fall of the Soviet Union, would be involved in another global conflict at this fourth turning. Of course, every 80, 90 years, we seem to forget the lessons of our ancestors. There's very few World War II vets left to influence our culture. A bunch of their children are here, and they only know the good times that they were the beneficiaries of winning such a war. And now it seems like we've got a plenty of boomers and older, such as Lindsey Graham and whatnot, who cheer on war, knowing that they don't have to deal with the repercussions of it, but we as the younger generations do. So it's I think that is a big one, and I really hope it doesn't happen. But I mean, they're evacuating people from consulates in Iran right now. The U.S. State Department put out a message, says to get out of Israel. If you're in Israel and you're an American citizen, it seems Trump waited for after the State of the Union, and now it's bombs away. Don't like it at all. Not a fan. Don't think that we should be doing this, but it's and even Trump doesn't have a good reason, right? Like, not a fan. What do you guys think about what's going on right now there?
Yeah,
strongly agree. I think your point is strong coming from Neil there. We're essentially sleepwalking into war again because nobody around appreciates the horrors of it. I think that's the context we're in. War is also an effective way to deal with the debt because you get everyone to agree to print the money, right? If life is existential, then we have to do something big and hard, and that creates inflation that we, quote, need. And so I think that's real. And if it's not Iran, let's say this one stays regional, blows over, that doesn't get us out of this, right? It just the next one, right? We had Ukraine, we just went to Venezuela, we've got the Middle East all over the place, we've got a potential conflict in Taiwan. A lot of tinder is out there, and it doesn't take much for that spark.
Mm-hmm. He even talked about it a little bit in the State of the Union, kind of like laying the foundations that, hey, America, like, pay attention. We're on the precipice of war here. So it is, no one wants to go to war. It's always the generals that are in their mansions, telling the, the 25-year-old kids, 20-year-old kids to go out and fight for them. And it's never good. You don't want to have war. And so I don't think anyone's out there cheering for it. Which brings up my next point though, too, is like, do you think we're going to have like some white flags, to get the media and get people on their side? I don't know. If
False flags?
False flags. Yeah.
I would have put it past them. That's how we got involved last time around over there. Nobody wants this. Like, Trump's base was very clear that they wanted him reelected because he started no new wars, right? He was totally against the last, both Bush and Obama. And now it seems as if that's gone out the window. He's going to totally lose his base if we do get into a protracted conflict over there. But that, we gotta, I guess, let's keep this moving. And my next one is on institutional decay. And I think that is perfectly personified in the Epstein files. The release of 3 million plus emails of Epstein shows that no matter which side you're on, Republican, Democrat, or just a billionaire, you're all on the same team and they're all up to some pretty no good business. We see the biggest, even members of Trump's cabinet, right? A picture just came out of Howard Lutnick on his island in 2012 when he said he testified to Congress that he didn't talk to Epstein after 2005, even though he was living right next to him, right, in New York City. So this goes up to the highest levels. Trump did not mention it once, of course, in the State of the Union, even though it's been in the news for the last month and it's the biggest thing that anybody really wants to talk about. There's rot. There's institutional rot from the top to the bottom. And that's what happens in a fourth turning. We need to start anew and build institutions from the ground up because, as we see in the Epstein files, everybody who has power seems to be involved in some nefarious business.
What percentage do you think of Americans have strong confidence in institutions right now?
You got a number? I would say 25%.
Damn close.
I was gonna guess 23% because I'm pretty sure I've seen a 77% number. But what do you got?
Maybe this data is wrong. 28%. 10% of confidence in Congress, TV stations. So the people are completely distrusting the news now. 10%. And the ones that still have the majority of the trust are small business, military, and then science we just touched on. I think people are losing trust in the science as well. So this is 75% of Americans. This is the stat you probably pulled up. Say they're feeling frustrated or angry towards the federal government. So definitely a good one. If the institutions start falling apart, people can't trust them at all. It's only going to cause more and more chaos.
100%. And back to war for a second. Are we going to have false flags? The answer is of course. Every war since ever deployed the same tactic. If you can't honestly get the people to support the war, you come up with catalysts to get people to support the war. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Okay, we better go. We knew it was false then, and we did it anyways. And I think it would be naive to assume that our government wouldn't do that again in the future. And it's not just our government; it's every government. It's an effective tactic.
I'm going to go back to the State of the Union for mine, which one thing I did laugh out loud on when was Trump was talking about the insider trading of the government and Congress. And he goes, Pelosi, did you stand for that one? which is pretty funny because Pelosi is obviously in the news as the biggest culprit there. Going along the same lines, though, I think is like just people in the power. They don't understand the technology. So we're talking about this AI boom. It goes back to I think it was 2018 or whenever Zuckerberg was in front of Congress, and they asked him how does Facebook make money? And he's like, Senator, we run ads, And so I think the issue is the average senator age is 64 years old. A lot of this new technology is being taught to them right in real time, and so I think part of the issue is the aging, Congress and the issues that are real to the younger generation, and then the ones that we'll actually have to face, they're going to be off this planet by then, right? And so that's a big issue. Is I don't think they're dealing with a lot of this stuff as urgent as they should be, because they're not going to have to deal with the repercussions of that. So, thinking getting some younger faces in government that I'd love to see people in their 40s and 50s get in where they're wise enough, they've seen enough, they've worked, and have dealt with the things that, real Americans have to deal with, versus these, a lot of the folks they've never had a real job either too. So I think they're talking and they've never actually had to deal with what Americans have to deal with. So
I think that one actually goes deeper. Like, we can say old politicians don't understand tech. True. But I think the real problem is that we created a system where our politicians have a career path in politics. And if you have a career path in politics, over time, you start to take donations from here and over there, and you get corrupted, and your incentives leads you to keep your little political seat and make money through insider trading or shady deals or whatever. And if we allow career politicians, that is an inevitable outcome, in my opinion. Founding Fathers' vision of a representative democracy was that some farmer businessman would temporarily serve and represent the people that live by him. And once he's done with his term, he goes back to being a farmer again, and you find someone else to do the job.
Do you think Trump's admin is trying to do some of that? Like, they brought in some big leaders, but
I really have a hard time knowing what's real and what's not. Like, I want to give our president the benefit of the doubt, but the more I see, the more I learn. It really doesn't feel like drain the swamp is the driver. So I really don't think so. I think left and right are essentially the same. You get slight different flavors, but we've had the system for so long that, unless you really do bring all outsiders, like I thought David Sachs was a cool pick.
Yeah.
That feels like an outsider without having to scratch everyone's back along the way. But that feels like a tiny, tiny percentage of the government. And so, I think the whole system sucks. And I don't know, man.
All right. Well, then what's your next pick, Brandon?
All right. Let's see. My next pick. What do I want to do? Let's do Rise of Socialism. I touched on this slightly, so it's a slight rehash, but I think it really matters. I think for people who aren't in the younger class who feel left out, they find this really hard to grasp. Like, if I talk to my dad and I say, like, hey, it's really hard for people my age and younger right now. And he's like, what do you mean? I worked, I was a bouncer at a bar during college and delivered pizzas, and I paid for college, no more avocado toast. Kind of caricaturizing my dad. He's not this dense, but that's the idea, right? The older generation can't grasp it, but it's true for the younger generation. And so, again, if we don't address the social contract, this is only going to get worse and worse and worse. And I don't know what it takes to right the ship. Like, if Mom Donnie totally screws up New York, will that send a message across the country to not do this? I don't know. Maybe the Democrats will condemn the more socialist side of their party because it's going to make them look bad. Maybe that's a temporary relief, but I expect much, much more of this until the social contract is fixed.
Just pull up this real quick. This is a chart that I see that, income versus the medium house prices too. That's another thing is, I was living in New York. I thought I'd be fine. Every one of my friends was getting these 2%, 2%, 3% rates. And now you take a look at it, and this problem is just extrapolating and getting worse and worse over time. And the price of homes is just going up like crazy. And now the incomes are not going alongside with them. But I don't know if they will change. I just saw on Twitter too that like there's never been as many homes for sale versus buyers too. So that will get something has to change with that as well.
Yeah, interesting chart on housing is housing price over M2 money supply. M2 is like 8 to 10% a year increasing, and that's roughly what we see in real estate. It's also very similar in S&P 500. So, we're told buy a house, and that's a way to build wealth. And yeah, nominally the house goes up, but as soon as you try to sell the house to buy something else you want, you're not actually getting ahead like you think you are. And so we're essentially hiding M2 growth in things that we use as monetary stores of value, like housing, like S&P 500. And that's not a very real system. And if we step back even further, M2's at 8 to 10%. Then we have technology, which makes things better, faster, cheaper, right? And if we allow M2 money growth of 8 to 10%, that essentially says all gains from technology are stolen from the government through money printing, and we're just supposed to be okay with that. And on the other hand, they ram this CPI garbage down our throat, which is not representative of M2.
Right.
And so, yeah, we're in a rough spot here, fellas. And the young people are right to be pissed. And that's why you see so much revolutionary energy in Bitcoin, is because the Bitcoiners came to this conclusion. They see it clearly, and we see all the lies perpetuated to try and keep that system going. And so Bitcoin, it could only emerge in a fourth turning, and it could only be realized in a fourth turning, because that's when the population starts to distrust the institutions.
Is your
I'm going to put that as your next choice. Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the
perfect.
There you go.
real quick before we hop into the next topic here, but Myers-Briggs, I saw you had a tweet about this. You did one, I think, several years ago, a study.
Yep.
It looks like back in 2021. Is it different, or I don't know if you're able to share those answers yet, or if that's still rolling, but curious to see like the psychology of a Bitcoiner.
Yeah. So 2020, I did a study, in quotation study. I pulled my Twitter following. Hey, what's your Myers-Briggs? I slurped up all the data and took a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is extreme divergence from general population. So the INTP, ENTP, INTJ, ENTJ, that's, you add those 4 personality types together, and it's like 10 to 15% of Gen Pop, and it's 50+% of Bitcoiners. And then you look at the 2 most common ones in Gen Pop, I forgot what they were, but it adds up to like 30 or 40% of Gen Pop are these other ones, and it's essentially 0 Bitcoiners.
Mm-hmm.
And so some noise in the data. I'm polling on Twitter, so you have to be like a tech first person, and I'm also looking at early adopters of any technology. So if we disentangle that, I assume Twitter people are already skewed from Gen Pop, and I assume early adopters of any tech are already skewed from Gen Pop. So we'd probably reduce the Bitcoin side a little bit if we're being honest. But I think that shows us that the perpetual rabbit hole dwellers, the system thinkers, the future oriented people, they're all the same type of people that adopt new tech, go on online. But that's who we see in Bitcoin. It also connects to, why don't we see retail coming back this cycle? Maybe because the type of people who like new technology, scary stuff that goes against social consensus are already here. And the next wave of adopters aren't going to come for the same reasons we did. They're going to come for Bitcoin when it's a normalized thing that everyone uses. Also, volatility is a factor here, I think. I think risk-taking people are a small percentage of the population, and Bitcoin has high volatility, and that's scary for most people. So I think it's a bit of personality bias and a little bit of volatility bias, which is why we're not seeing retail. And retail has no money. We talked about inflation, cost of living. You don't have investable income. You don't have any surplus at the end of the month. How are you going to buy Bitcoin? How are you going to buy anything?
That's a big thing we've been talking about too. It's just like I see these prices and I'm like, shit, I need more liquidity, you know, and no one wants to sell, which brings me to our next sponsor real quick. Let's stop for 30 seconds here, because a lot of people that are Bitcoiners, you did the hard part. You stacked, you held, you didn't panic sell, but real life still happens. Taxes, new opportunities, a global calamity like the fourth turning, and selling Bitcoin just feels wrong. And that's where Arch comes in. Arch lets you borrow against your Bitcoin instead of selling. You borrow what you need, repay anytime, and only pay interest on what you use, all without triggering a tax event. Best part, Bitcoin stays yours. The best part is the Bitcoin stays yours. Arch has no rehypothecation policy. Collateral is never lent out. It is held in qualified, insured bankruptcy remote custody with full transparency. Check them out, archlending.com, and then do /daily stack, and you get 1% off of what their lowest rate is. So check those guys out. Cool. So I'm up. I'm also going to go with a Bitcoin trend here. So the overall theme to moving to hard assets. You know, we saw this back in when they had the gold rush, and then the gold was taken away. But you take a look at what's happening now. Central banks have bought over 1,000 tons of gold annually since 2022, 2 times the decade average. The global trade, the gold demand exceeding 5,000 tons in 2025. we just brought on Frank Holmes, who's a big old gold bug, 71 years old, has a lot of energy. But he was seeing it across the board too. All these countries are, not trusting as much with the U.S. The yen carry trade feels like it's kind of over right now. And a lot of people, we saw it with silver, we saw it with gold. Bitcoin has kind of diverted, actually. But I think our time is coming very soon where people start to realize, okay, we need to have hard assets. And even with gold, one thing I always bring up is Michael Saylor. He brought this up. If you hypothetically owned 100% of the gold today, in 50 years from now, you now own half, because they're finding about 2% every single year. I don't know if the Elon Musk stuff is actually going to come into fruition, but he thinks there's a lot of gold and different assets that you can get in Mars and on the moon. So that could potentially change things as well. But there's a lot of gold still out there. There's a lot of silver still out there. And there's not a lot of Bitcoin still out there. So overall trend moving to hard assets, kind of ties in with the distrust for the government and where they see the future going. And so people are moving to assets that have been around for thousands of years.
You're right. It's a basement trade. It's live. You want things that you can actually hold on to when the going gets bad, because if all your assets are tied up to a central database, they can easily just turn that off. And there was actually a big spat on Twitter with Lynn Alden saying that Bitcoin's the one thing that you can own, whereas people are saying, don't you know about stock certificates? Well, they can turn those stock certificates off very easily at the DDTC. That's the centralized ledger.
All this gold too is paper gold.
Yeah.
You're not actually holding the gold when you're buying the gold ETFs or whatever. So that's all paper too. Where Bitcoin, you can have it right on your desk, like you have. So
bada bang. All right. I'm up next. I'm going to go fourth turning book sales. The fact that this book is so popular shows that we are aware culturally that we are at a time of great change. The book came out in 1997 and it really popped off once again back in 2019. The reviews and ratings for the book have doubled since 2019. It currently sits at over 12,000 ratings on Good Books. It's moved from the history section to the macro strategy section on Amazon and is often bundled with Peter Zeihan books and Dalio books. So people are very aware of this. They're thinking of it as part of their global strategy, how they're planning for the world ahead. And of course, no book gets a sequel 25 years later, unless it is in the zeitgeist. And the fourth turning is here, came out in 2023. People are thinking about this. They're looking at the tides of history and seeing that, hey, all this stuff really adds up. They thought it would happen back in 1997. They prognosticated all this, and it's fulfilling the prophecy. So we are aware that it is happening. The book sales are up, and that's a big sign for me that we are in the fourth turning. And my last one, I was going to go with the polarization, and we already talked about that, of how 80% of partisans now believe that the other party poses a threat that, if not stopped, will destroy America as we know it. But yesterday I joked that I was going to bring up Bonnie Blue. I think the degeneracy of our modern times shows that we are in a need of great change, that no society can go on forever like this, where we care most about the number of people you can sleep with in one day. It's gone out of control. We need to bring our traditions back, our society back, and the degeneracy is a great sign of the fact that we are at a time of great change.
Cultural parallel to Weimar Germany.
Yes.
Extreme degeneracy in the culture, disgusting things we can't even imagine. Well, now we can start to imagine with the Epstein files, but going on there as well. And a lot of people criticize Saifedean for drawing a link between the money supply and culture. And maybe he took some liberties there coming after modern art because he doesn't like it or something. But I think it's very clear that the money supply does have effects on culture. And maybe we can argue the magnitude of those effects, but the effects are real. And looking at Weimar, looking at the West today, I think the parallel is real.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about financial nihilism a lot too. And you see not only are the sports books popping up, but these prediction markets, where you can literally bet on everything. And I've been bringing this up on the past few shows, but even like Robinhood is a microcosm. Robinhood, you could have your 401k or your IRA, and within 2 clicks, you could bet all that money directly on a parlay, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, I'm happy I brought it up. It clearly not
jaw dropper.
Realize that. That it is pretty crazy. I kind of in the same, dystopian fiction would be my category here, where the headlines are starting to call some of this out, right? The top 1% controls 55 trillion, which is nearly as much as the bottom 90% combined. We hear, the headlines show Elon Musk is the first trillionaire. 905 billionaires hold 7.8 trillion. The bottom 50%, which is 66 million households, hold 4.1 trillion. So this wealth inequality, we're talking about divide, this wealth inequality, we're in this K-shaped economy. Layoffs surged 50%. I didn't realize that it was that high in 2025 versus the prior year. So it's all coming into fruition, and the media is starting to talk about it, which ingrains it into people's heads. They start to look at it more, and people start to feel hopeless, right? And that's where they go and they say, all right, I need to buy Powerball tickets. I need to win a 12-leg parlay, and you feel that way. I've seen my balance in my sports book go down. I'm like, shit, I gotta hit something big. I don't want to sit here for 3 months to try to build that back up. So let me try to win quick. And I think Instagram, I just saw a study about showing young kids shows on your phone, how it creates this attention loop where they can't pay attention at all. And so we see the TikTokification basically of our youth. And if they don't have something within 5 seconds, they're looking elsewhere for something. And so that's a psychological thing that people are dealing with right now. And I don't see that going away necessarily. I know they were talking about banning TikTok, but instead of banning it, they're bringing it to all be owned by Larry Ellison, right? So now he and that was the other big news too. Netflix bowed out of the Warner Brother deal. So now Ellison's got his whole media conglomerate, and I'm sitting here trying to defend my people here that we don't own the media and shit, and it's not looking so good here. So yeah, I'd say in general, just the headlines and this dystopian fiction that we feel like we're living in.
Yeah, well said. I think the rise of sports betting is a fantastic indicator here. It is just a symptom of the nihilism, financial nihilism we discussed. So yeah, strong agree there. Great point. And that chart I just sent over, I think, Rob, you just had it pulled up. So my last one, and we're kind of grasping at straws here. We have a lot of indicators, but I'm going to just say the rise of populism, which is a function of the economic inequality. So looking at this chart here, red line is the bottom 90% of wealth. Green line is the top 0.1%. So kind of showing what you just said. We had the era of populism during the last fourth turning, when you saw the top 1% exceed the wealth of the bottom 90%. That creates all the pushback, burn the cities, etc. And then towards the end of that fourth turning, we saw that trend reverse. We started building wealth. That's when we had middle-class families and a rising tide. And then that bottomed out in the 80s, maybe late 80s. We had the peak prosperity period for the bottom 90%, and it's gone down since. And we're seeing that green line tick back up, about to cross over again here. And so, yeah, when that occurs, people demand change, and it shows up as populism on the left and the right. And this is not an America problem. Everywhere you look, politicians the ones who get elected are more extreme. And that's going to continue until we fix the inequality issue.
Very well said.
Well, that is the conclusion of our Mount Rushmore. Look at that. I think we hit all the major notes there. We got war, national debt, inequality, socialism, populism, everything that you would read in the Fourth Turning book. We just saved you hours and hours of reading, just watching the daily stack here.
Exactly. And a bonus for you.
Oh, please.
The fact that we did a snake draft is also
exactly a microcosm of what we're dealing with right now. That's a great point.
Boys, this has been a lot of fun. Brandon, thank you so much for joining. Everybody, if you're watching, go to 21rates.com/stack. Take part in this competition where it's going to be open till 5 p.m. So you got some time. You got a couple hours to still use the code word turning. Of course, in honor of our Mount Rushmore today, you can enter the competition for 21,000 sats. We want to help you grow your stack while Bitcoin is cheaper than it has been in the last year or so. Add to your stack, let it grow faster than ever. And we are helping you do that at 21rates.com/stack. It has been an absolute pleasure having you, Brandon. You are an expert, the Bitcoin Twitter's expert on the fourth turning. I'm so glad to have your knowledge as part of this show. If people want to find out more about you, your work, and where you work, where should they go?
That's right. You can just check the hat for all the details. No, easiest way to connect with me is on Twitter, B Quidum, my last name. That's where you can find me there. All my writings linked there. Otherwise, all my essays on Bitcoin and other topics are at brandonquidum.com. Before I was the fourth turning guy, I was the Bitcoin mushroom guy, exploring Bitcoin through the lens of biology. Bitcoin's funny that way. You can combine different topics, see them through a Bitcoin lens, and sometimes generate novel insights. This one's a big one. I think talking about the fourth turning is a lot more fun than experiencing the fourth turning. But at least we had a little foresight in the Bitcoin community to start preparing before it got worse. I do work at Swan, been there 6.5 years, very proud of what we built. If you live in the US and you want to buy Bitcoin, custody Bitcoin, we have a collaborative custody product if you want to own it in your retirement account. If you want to talk to a human to work through your Bitcoin strategy, we pride ourselves on the service that we provide for our clients. You can get started at swan.com, and you can send me an email at brandon@swan.com, and I can introduce you to one of the folks on our team to get any questions answered, or if you want to get started, that's the best way to do it.
Love it. We'll have to have you back to talk about the mushrooms, because I was reading some of your tweets about it, and it was fascinating. And beyond that, like, your tweets are amazing, and then people you retweet. I've added about like 6 people since that you've retweeted that are a great follows. So, Brandon, awesome. Thanks for coming on. Always a pleasure, and we'll have to link up in Minnesota this summer when I come back. So.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, fellas. Super fun. And Rob, I saw you had a piano in the background. I just bought a piano after I grew up playing classical piano, took a long hiatus. Now I have a son and I want him to get incepted into music. So I've been playing every day for the last 3 to 6 months, and feels good.
Got to do it. All right, boys, have yourselves a weekend. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back on